presentation by Guido Palazzo, I wanted to share with you all some research I've been doing around CSR and the supply chain. So let's talk through some of the concepts we just heard, and then I want to share with you 3 companies that I found are really leading sustainable practices in production and the supply chain. So some of the key concepts that we just heard about, one of them was consumption. Now, based on a study done by Christensen, Waslin, and Sunderland, they found that consumers are conscious of the desire to make purchases from companies who are socially responsible, but that when it actually comes down to changing their behavior, people tend to stick with what they know and are comfortable with. So just like Guido was talking about in his TEDx talk, that although people have a desire to purchase from socially responsible companies, that if it's different from the habits that they're used to, oftentimes it won't happen. So in order to change habits, Guido talked about the idea that people must reprogram their beliefs and values. And so that they're to change their behavior, their beliefs and values have to be reprogrammed to be more compelling than just their habits. So let's talk about consumption and production. So this is a really interesting concept because without consumption, there would not be production. This is a basic supply and demand concept. Now, in order to have sustainable production, consumers need to change their behavior so that they're only consuming what they need from companies engaging in CSR principles. So this idea that consumers tend to purchase maybe more than what they need or consume more than what they need, which drives organizations to produce at a really high rate, this can sometimes lead to practices that are more about quantity versus engaging in quality and sustainable practices. And in a recent article by Roy and Singh, they really highlight that if we're going to ensure the environment of CSR and sustainability in our production practices, that it's not just one organization's responsibility or the consumer's responsibility, but that it's everybody actively contributing to the engagement from all stakeholders in this process. Now let's talk about consumption and storytelling. So in the TEDx talk we heard about, Guido really talked about this idea that we must create a connection for all stakeholders, and that this idea that corporate social responsibility initiatives and programs and the data that organizations produce are not necessarily compelling enough for consumers to change their behavior, but that what is potentially compelling enough for consumers is when you connect to their individual values and belief systems and they feel that their purchasing decisions or the habits that they have every day collectively impact as a group. So if you can get everybody connected through a story to change their behavior by aligning it with their values and beliefs, that there is a potential for everybody to engage in sustainable practices from both the supply chain as well as the consumption phase. Now I want to share with you 3 multinational corporations that I've been researching that have really engaged in sustainable production practices. So Cisco Systems is technology, they produce technology equipment, and what they do is they are really leading the future in circular production and circular economy. So this is a concept that at the end of their life, products, instead of being disposed of and a wasted, resource, that they're actually put back into the production cycle to be repurposed or utilized in additional resources. So there's a great article on the circular economy by Stahl that goes more in depth into this. But Cisco has a program called Cisco Refresh, where it really manifests that circular production concept. And then the other thing that they do is they're very transparent in how they are being held accountable to their stakeholders with the CSR initiatives and commitments that they've made. So they produce a really comprehensive annual report that shows their progress, their focus, and where they're headed next for their future of CSR. So from a production standpoint, they are seen as one of the leaders in CSR principles in their production. Another organization that you're most likely familiar with is Starbucks. Starbucks can be found on quite a few of the Forbes Top 100 lists for companies. And some of the work that they've engaged in around the production supply chain is they've been really focusing on greener production. So they're looking at creating access to recycling on a global level, not just in countries and cities that have those practices already, but really looking at how they can bring access to recycling for every country and every city. Now they're also looking at, in their supply chain, how to reduce the amount of waste that they have, how to produce more sustainable packaging, and especially cups. So they're also incentivizing consumers to change their behavior by bringing in their own cups. They also do a lot of work around economic development. So they have all sorts of programs for their farmers. So they do resource centers, they offer loans, and they create collaborative partnerships and ensure mutually beneficial partnerships with their suppliers and vendors. So it's not just beneficial for Starbucks, they also make sure that it's beneficial for those that are engaging in business with them. The other group is Tesla. So this company was actually founded on the mission by a group of engineers to create cars that ran solely on renewable energy, because they wanted to create a world where that was not dependent on fossil fuel. So they're starting with cars. They've also branched out into other renewable energy sources for homeowners, businesses, organizations to essentially have more solar power and renewable sources for energy. The interesting thing is that Tesla released its first sustainability report, and they were actually able to quantify the fact that they have 550,000 electric vehicles on the road today, and that has saved 4 million metric tons of carbon dioxide from being released into the atmosphere, just having those a little over 500,000 cars on the road. So they are continuing their mission and vision, and will continue to be a leader in renewable energy sources. Now, in conclusion, it's clear, based on all this research, that when consumers are compelled by their values and beliefs to apply socially responsible decision-making practices to their habits and behaviors, there's a positive impact on furthering corporate social responsibility on a global scale. Now, one of the things is that once consumers are able to reflect, their behavior is able to reflect their beliefs, organizations that currently have sustainable practices in their production and supply chain will continue to benefit, if not have an increased benefit, as consumers are connecting more and more to the values and beliefs they hold in their purchasing practices. So ultimately, in order for everybody to benefit from CSR, we need to understand as consumers and organizations that we're all connected to a larger purpose, and create a story compelling enough for everyone to change their behavior to ensure that we are engaging in practices that are responsible for our environment and for future generations to come. So thanks for letting me share this information. I hope you found it valuable.